Uh, it's indeed pleasure, and on behalf of the Times Network and ET Now, it's an absolute delight to be associated with this forum and with this event. Let me take the liberty of very quickly introducing our esteemed panelist. This is Harini Nagendra, Director Research Center Professor and Lead Center for Climate Change and Sustainability and Professor of Sustainability at the renowned Azim Premji University. Now, Ms. Narendra is an ecologist and professor of sustainability. Over 25 years, she has been at the leading edge of research, examining and conservation in forest and cities of South Asia from the view of both landscape, ecology, and social justice. Now, for her achievements, research, and practice, she has received a number of awards, including the 2009 Corselli Prize from the US National Academy of Sciences and 2013 Eleanor Senior Scholar Award, and in 2017 Creative Web of Science Award. Her publication includes the book Nature in the City, Bangalore, in the Past, Present, and Future, and Cities and Canopies, Trees in India and in Indian Cities, as well as recent newspapers, Nature, Nature Sustainability, and Science. Professor Harini also writes a monthly column, which I must say I do read very often. It's just an eye-opener for me. The Green Goblin, I've referred to her writings more regularly in order to really get the message of climate change, how serious it is for us, and what really needs to be done. It's an absolute pleasure, Professor Harini, to have you part of the panel. It also gives me great pleasure to introduce Shri Rajan Institution on Climate Change for several years and was associated with climate policy making in the run-up and after the Paris Agreement. Now, he's going to smile a lot for us, but trust me, when he was negotiating that deal, he was not smiling at all. He was very stern on how things have to be taken forward. He is Distinguished Fellow in the Energy Resources That's TERI, where he works on areas relating to climate change and adaptation of strategic carbon markets and sustainable development. He is member of the technical advisory body of the International Civil Aviation Organization, and in 2018 and 19, he served on the subcommittee of the Ministry of Finance on Climate Finance. Such a pleasure to have you, Ms. Shri Rashmi. I look forward to a very engaging conversation. And my next panelist is someone, well, wow, she needs no introduction whatsoever. Yes, it is Dia Mirza. Dia Mirza dons many hats. She is an award-winning actor, producer, UN Environment Goodwill Ambassador, and United Nations Secretary General for Sustainable Development Goals. When I was reading her introduction, I was thinking, should I first introduce that I'm such a big fan of her movies and her work, or should I talk about the climate change challenge which she's accepted? As an advocate of the environment, she puts some money where her beliefs are, very important. She puts some money where her beliefs are and has invested in sustainable brands like Biku and Shumi. Through her investments, she has taken the practice of sustainable lifestyle one step further. I really want to understand from Dia that how all of us can really adopt that. Today, Dia has become the voice of environmental and wildlife conservation in the country and is a torchbearer of causes related to nature. For this reason, she was appointed as the United Nations Environment Goodwill Ambassador for India at the UNEA Assembly held in Nairobi. Good evening to all of you, and such a pleasure to have you all. Dr. Harini, you're a climate scientist, author, and also you are a very vocal voice in terms of what needs to be done for climate change. We have a very young audience today. And my question to you is that India right now is a very young country. We have the skill, we have the ability, and more importantly, the youth. What can the youth of India do to ensure that the world we are living in today, when we are passing it on to the next generation, it's a safer world?
It's a pleasure to be here, first of all, and thank you to everyone. I'm looking forward to what the rest of the panel has to say too. If you ask me what the youth do, and as an educator, I'm constantly in touch, I'd say, with a wide variety of young people from different parts of the country. I find actually that they have a lot to teach us rather than us teaching them. And what I find the most inspiring, I'll tell you, is this. They have a strong moral code. Somewhere along the way, as we start becoming older and get this voice that society keeps telling us, be pragmatic, adjust a little. Don't look at the normative core. Manage. You just have to get ahead. You don't need to look at what's good for society, what's good for the environment, what's good for the world. You need to get ahead. What I find about the youth is they have this very strong moral voice. And sustainability to me at the end is a very moral issue. How much right do we have to consume more than we need while destroying other people's lives and destroying the planet? And so that, I think, as long as they can get that moral core at the essence, it's also a technical problem, but often we tend to think of sustainability as only a technical problem. So this is where I feel the youth have a role to play. If you have a young person with that moral conscience standing in front of you, you tend to listen to them. If somebody young is telling you, why are you not recycling? Why are you using so much water? Why are you not composting your trash? All of us listen to our children. So that, I think, is really the way to go. To me, they are the hope for the future. They're the one reason I'm very hopeful now.
Just to take a slight detour, I can also see Mr. Munjal is also with us. Good evening, Mr. Munjal. Great to have you as part of the panel. I'm just going to very quickly introduce Mr. Munjal. I've interacted with him on various forums in personal capacity and again in private capacity. So I'm actually delighted to have him on this forum. Now, Mr. Munjal is the Managing Director of Hero Electric Vehicles Private Limited, a part of Hero Eco Group. As an entrepreneur, having built the Hero Electric brand into a leading manufacturer and a market leader in the EV two-wheeler market space, he's also widely recognized in shaping the Indian electric two-wheeler industry as well as contributors to the various forums in electric vehicles spare both India and globally. Hero Electric and Mr. Munjal in 2012 launched the A2B in international markets, a premium brand of electric bikes, widely considered as one of the pioneers in the premium EV global industry. He's one person who has changed the dynamics of the Indian two-wheeler industry. And if one really looks at the future of India, it's only because of entrepreneurs and visionaries like him, we can really look at serious changes in the mobility business. Welcome, Mr. Munjal. I look forward to seeing you in a very different avatar, nothing on market, nothing on economy, only on climate today, sir.
Thank you.
Professor, my second question to you is that if I look at the success of India, the Y2K revolution, how we have really emerged as a leader in areas of vaccination. Do you think India and Indian youth can really bend the curve?
Absolutely. I think what we need is innovation for the future. And what you see is the kinds of social challenges we have in India, or the kinds of the ways in which our population densities or our linkages to the environment still are very close despite our population densities. Or let's say the ways in which Indian communities think about nature or think about sustainability. And I think we still, if you look at our carbon footprint, even the more wealthy of us, carbon footprints are much lower for an average Indian than they are in the US. So I think if you combine that with our technology and a technological knowledge, I think there's a lot of place to bend the curve. There are a number of things that are already being done. I mean, clearly on renewables, India is leading the way in a lot of innovation. There are a number of other places also where technology is really being pioneered from India. So yes, that combination to me of the sensitivity or the culture of knowing and being sensitive to the environment combined with the technological progress is something I think which is very unique to us.
Mr. Rashmi, while we all can acknowledge that climate change is something which is the need of the hour, governments are talking about it, companies are adopting it. The word ESG is now something which is universal for just about every boardrooms. But what about the practicality? What about the transition and the cost of transition? In last 6 months, suddenly in financial markets, we're using a word called greenflation, which is the cost of going eco-friendly is something which is causing inflation.
True. Thank you very much for bringing up this issue. And first of all, thank you for giving me this opportunity. Yes, in fact, the damage to environment is an external cost for the society. That's the problem. That is essentially the problem, that all of us look at the cost of the environment as external to our processes, and we don't internalize this cost. And so does the corporate world. It never thinks of internalizing this cost, which they have, the damage which they have inflicted on the society as a whole. So this is really a challenge that the corporate world, the business community, and not just the business and the corporates, but all the stakeholders in the society, they must see the damage which we are causing to environment as a cost that we all must bear. And we must take steps to mitigate that cost. Now, how do we do that? How does the business and the corporate world do that? In fact, you must be aware of an arrangement put out by the Security and Exchange Board of India, SEBI, which is called Business Sustainability Reporting Framework. And they're expected to come up with a report on what kind of sustainable actions they are taking in their business processes and business actions. But that's not enough. In fact, it has been in practice for the last 5-6 years, but it hasn't actually delivered much. So there is a need to strengthen this regulation, and that's where the ESG comes in. The environmental, the social, and the governance parameters which companies are following across the world, they are multiple in nature. There is so much of diversity. Everybody defines one's own, has a way of defining one's own standards about environmental safety, environmental mitigation measures. I mean, that's not enough. We need a uniform, a transparent way of following these standards, and these standards should be laid in a way that the business community feels comfortable with that, and we are also able to meet the climate goals. So there is a need for disclosure standards here, and I think SEBI is working on that line. Hopefully this should become a part of the regulatory framework within which the corporates operate. They should be able to disclose the kind of actions that they are taking, the impact of their actions on the environment. And once this data is available in public domain, it becomes easier to take actions by other stakeholders, because all of us are equal partners in this process. It's not simply the corporates and the business, but all other, the government, the individuals, the youth. All of us need to know what the business is doing, and accordingly there will be responses by the community.
Would you walk us through your experiences? Again, I'm encouraging you to talk about what youth can do, because we have a young audience here, a student audience here. Some of them are seriously looking at how they can contribute and they can add value, because the youth of India today, I hate to say, sir, is slightly more conscious and aware about environmental laws than
Absolutely, I agree with you and Dr. Nagendra, that youth of today is much more conscious about its responsibilities. They're much more aware than we were at this point in when we were learning and when we were growing. So we should. We are very hopeful of what the youth is going to do in future. But I would like to caution here that it's okay to make a personal choice. It's very important to be aware of the environmental issues and make personal choices. But the personal choices are not simply moral choices. They have to be ethical in nature. And when ethics comes in, it becomes a joint responsibility of all the stakeholders in society. It is not an individual choice alone. And what I mean by this is that there's need of a regulation, there is need of a business, the community, the politics. Every stakeholder in each of these fields must act in the same moral manner. So do we have a moral order in which we are able to mitigate the environmental problems? Globally, certainly we don't have. We have had a convention to fight the climate change problem since 1992. But we haven't succeeded in fighting this problem because there is essentially a fundamental problem about the ethical code here, because the nations of the world don't want to follow this ethical code. So how can we follow this code in isolation or in completely independently in a single country? We must make our personal choices, but I would suggest that we should also have effective regulatory framework, systemic solutions which should support the actions of the individuals. There are different ways of doing it, but we can discuss that.
So I look forward to discussing that. You're an ambassador of climate change, and perhaps your story is an inspiration for a lot of us. If I may request and encourage you to walk us through that story, because your story will encourage a lot of youth in India. I'm sure the story, like we say, has some khatti meethi yadein, some good moments, some bad moments, some frustrating moments also.
Thank you for that warm introduction to start off with, Nikunj. And I'm very, very grateful to be a part of this conversation. And I see that this has a very big participation. So I hope some of what we say gets taken back home and implemented. This is also a very amazing panel. So I'm very proud to be amidst these stalwarts. My story is actually very simple. It starts with an excursion, a field trip that my school took me on when I was very young. I am revealing my age here by saying that the first alarm bells for climate change were rung in the year of my birth, 1981. So our school that was founded on the principles of J. Krishnamurti, a lot of classes were held outdoors amid trees, encouraged the conversation and helped us understand the difference between need and wants. And while we were on one of our school excursions to work with local communities, while we learned from them how to grow food, we were encouraged to teach them a skill that we had. And I remember very early during that experience, feeling determined that I wanted to make this a way of my life, that I wanted to be able to make a difference and help people because it felt so good. I didn't realize at the time that when I was an adult, I would become a part of mainstream media in the manner that I did become. And it was really in my early 20s when I became a part of mainstream media through the work that I was doing. I recognized a huge gap between the science and the people, and the fact that, you know, the great work that scientists and environmentalists were doing in the country was not really reaching civil society. And it was about that time that I decided to use my voice and use my platform to bridge that gap. And I did it because I felt despondent and extremely passionate about taking the voice of these committed wildlife conservationists and NGOs and scientists to people. Because quite frankly, Nikunj, it's something that occurred to me, and I think now more and more people are taking cognizance of the fact, and I'm grateful for that, and maybe I've had some role to play in it, is that, you know, human behavior and anthropogenic activities were destroying everything that we count on and depend on for our well-being, our health, our future, our peace, and our progress. And it was extremely disturbing to know that mainstream media was not talking about climate change. There was just so little action being taken to educate people and help people understand the importance and the urgency of developing a more sustainable world and a more sustainable society. And when I started to bridge the gap, I spent more time with people working on the ground, learning more, educating myself. And then, of course, as I learned, I communicated and helped more people understand. But fundamentally, Nikunj, I think what happened with me as an individual is that it created a paradigm shift in the way I perceive and I live life. So it really started with questioning my own choices, my own patterns of consumption, my own needs versus wants, and bringing that personal change, and of course sharing that and taking everybody in my sphere of influence along with me. As I learned, I taught.
They say charity begins at home, and you've changed and adopted your lifestyle. Would you like to share some experiences just so that we can, take and perhaps adopt some of them? Because I really want to learn from you, understand from you that what I can do right after this call or after this discussion, so that I live a life where I'm actually living a life where I'm satisfied and where I'm feeling happy about contributing back to the society and the environment.
I draw a lot of inspiration from one of my heroes, and she is somebody who's written a very powerful book called Hope. And I hope everybody who's watching here reads that book. You know who I'm talking about?
No.
No? Professor, would you like to tell us who I'm talking about?
Drawback is that I read so many business books, and that's the reason why we have you on the forum, because
Okay.
you tell us,
I'm
you'll
going to
help
come
us.
back to
you guide
her,
us.
but let me start with saying that hope basically is a measure. It's a countermeasure to the despondence that many of us, especially young people, are feeling because of the enormity and the intensity of the crisis, the climate crisis. Young people are taking more action simply because they are exposed to and are experiencing more frequency, intensity of climate change. So our previous generations didn't feel it the way we are feeling it, whether it's air pollution or it's the crisis of waste management or even environmental pollution. So the actions that we can all take, the first and the foremost action to take is to understand the role that we play as individuals living on the planet. And there's a big part to play in the way we treat nature and the environment. And it starts with questioning our choices and our patterns of living. So whatever you use in your everyday life, whether it's a shampoo or a soap or a grain, a cereal, or any product, ask yourself, where is it coming from? What were the methods of producing this product that has reached your home? And what is going to be the outcome once you use that product when you finally reintroduce it into the environment? Is it good for the earth? Is it healthy for the planet? If the answer is yes, choose it, use it. If the answer is no, refuse it. The second action that I think all of us can take quite easily is to refuse all single-use plastics. We've been harping on about it. Plastics, nanoplastics have reached the North and the South Pole. They are now being found in the bloodstream of babies. It is one of the most toxic and harmful things in the environment. And we're really struggling to manage the quantum of plastic waste we're creating as a human species. So the first thing that I think we can all easily refuse is that godforsaken plastic straw, the disposable plastic cutlery and cups. Carry your own bottle wherever you go, so use your own. Oh my God, this thing doesn't allow you to show the bottle, but well, we've been a bit of a trendsetter. We've created a hashtag called traveling bottle. I'm very happy to see more and more people carrying their own bottles to work, to the gym, to wherever. The other thing that we can, of course, easily refuse is the plastic bag. I'm very grateful to the government of India. They've come up with a consolidated list of plastic items that they are going to ensure are not available to us anymore, which is fantastic. The plastic bag is not a part of that list, but we'll get there. The third thing that I think we can all do is to address the food that we eat. So to avoid packaged food as much as possible. I've lost a lot of money because I really believe in this. I say no to a lot of endorsement work because, this is a lifestyle choice that I've made. So to avoid packaged food as much as possible, to eat locally grown and seasonal fruits and vegetables, it can make a huge difference. Of course, many Indians follow a mostly plant-based diet. It's a very cool thing to say in the Western world, but I think Indians by far do choose to lead and consume a more sustainable diet. Having said that, I think if more of us can practice a more plant-based diet, we'll be healthier and happier, and of course the planet will benefit. The fifth thing that I think we can all easily do is to replace our regular light bulbs, CFL bulbs, with LEDs, and become more conscious about the technology we're bringing home, to reuse, repurpose, recycle as much as possible. The sixth big item that I think can really contribute to change is waste management at home and in the workplace. if we can all just learn to segregate waste, start composting kitchen waste, and finding utility in all the other waste that we create. So depositing it at recycling centers. Young children in India are doing this and doing it so effectively and are leading this process. And it's shameful that we still struggle to convert households into just better managers of waste. And of course, if industries and hospitals and schools do it as well, it's a big, big bonus. The seventh item on my list is one that I find funny, but I'm sure everybody will find it easy to adopt. Limit the length of your bath to one song. And turn off the taps, fix the leaky tap, and turn off the mains on all of your power supplies. Don't leave the main switches on things. Reduce and refuse wasteful consumption.
Such effective and powerful.
I created a rainbow right there, so hopefully everybody will remember the 7 commandments of living a more sustainable life.
The scribbling, I'm sure, has written some of them down. I'm coming to Mr. Munjal, but thank you for those ideas, small and effective ideas, and that's
and the author of Hope is Jane Goodall.
Okay, thank you very much. See, that's a problem. Being a business journalist, I'm so entrenched in reading books on economy and politics that this one is something which I look forward to read. Mr. Munjal, good evening to you, sir, once again. Where do you think corporate India is in terms of acknowledging the importance of climate change? Like Dia said, ask a very basic question. If you are using steel, from where it is originating, if you're buying plastic, from where it is coming, is corporate India conscious of that, or it is profitability which perhaps takes the center stage? Because there's a shareholder need versus there is a ESG need versus there is a vision and a view of keeping the environment safe. You got to be honest with me, sir, this time.
Good evening, Nikunj. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for having me here. It's an absolute pleasure. See, there's no easy answer to that kind of a question. Now, what happens is at the end of the day, when you look at corporates, while there may be a very strong ESG angle to it, there is also a commercial angle which is attributable to it. Now, if you look at it from a public sector company, if you look at it from a company which is listed, you have to show good results. It's now in the last number of years, where ESG element is becoming extremely important. So companies which are showing, for example, if you look at the new IPOs which have happened of automotive companies, and if they have an electric vehicle component into it, the valuations that the market is accepting it, the valuations the market is giving is extremely high. If you look at the most valuable automotive company in the world right now in terms of this thing, it is an electric vehicle company. So globally, companies are realizing the importance of ESG, are realizing the importance of going green. And even if you look at our goals that we've set up for ourselves, the Prime Minister set at COP26, which was the net zero by 2070. When we start working backwards from there, corporates have a very, very strong role to play. So what is happening when we look at it, there is a certain level to which the corporates do push. So they push down to the tier 1, that what is your manufacturing process in terms of tier 1. They drill down to the tier 2 level in terms of what is the manufacturing process there. But beyond that, it kind of loses this thing because it then goes down to the raw material, etc., which they have no control over. So it's an important aspect. It's a very, very important area. We ourselves as a company are a green company. We are a platinum green building. We work in electric vehicles. We are working on ESGs at this point of time. We may not be completely ESG compliant at this point, but we are working towards that in terms of the whole thought process, in terms of our vendor base, etc. So while it's important for companies to actually maintain that commercial angle to it, they are moving towards ESG as well. And what's happening is that the cost of moving towards ESG has been reducing over the last number of years. It's no longer as exorbitant as it was a number of years back, which actually deterred a lot of corporates from actually going down that route. But now, as we've got younger generation coming in, as we are looking at more IPOs and we're looking at moving international, etc., ESG element is becoming a very, very important role in the overall scheme of things. What is also happening, what is also important when you look at it, is that it's not just the company itself, it's the people that work within the company, it is the people that supply to the company, it is the people that you're selling to. Earlier, what was happening is that when you were selling a product which was environmental friendly or organic, but yet it was much more expensive than a non-environmental friendly or non-organic product, customers weren't really buying it earlier. But now that customer preference has started to change. If you find, for example, like the newer generation coming in, they are demanding or they are asking for more organic in terms of our growth, in terms of the products that come out, and more environmental friendly products. And as Dia was already talking about the plastics, that we are using. So these are going to be all very important areas. It's a start. We are moving in that direction. Not all corporates are there yet. There is still a long way to go. But nevertheless, we are headed in that direction, and the market is accepting it in that manner. The market is rewarding companies which are coming in with the ESG element and penalizing the ones which don't have it. So market will actually dictate it, market will drive it, even if the companies don't go down that route to start with.
Mr. Munjal, do you see EV as a solution, or EV is more like a concept, an experiment? It is enjoying rich valuations by global investors. The pitch for EV is that if you buy an EV, you are a conscious, environmental friendly guy, but that EV is coming at a price. The EV still requires electricity. And in India, large part of power, sir, is still generated by burning coal.
EV is a step in that direction. Now, let's look at, the power generation, what you're talking about. You're right. Majority of the power that comes in India so far is coming out of coal. But we do have strong goals in place. We do have 500 gigawatts coming from non-fossil energy by 2030, and we will probably surpass that goal. We also have a goal of 50% of energy requirements through renewable energy by 2030. Now, let's consider the power generation that's happening. So this has historically been the case. Now we are graduating towards the solar and we are graduating towards renewal. But nevertheless, to start with, we came in as a thermal power. Now, in thermal power, when you plan out when you plan out a plant, it is actually planned to the capacity of peak loads. And those peak loads generally happen in the day. So they are between 11 to 4 during the day, which is when all the plants are running, all the offices are running, all facilities, everything is running. And then in the evening, the loads actually taper down. And this is a global phenomenon, it's not just India. The loads taper down, yet the plants have to keep on running because you cannot shut down the plant. So there's actually energy getting produced, which is not getting consumed. To start with, electric vehicles getting charged at night actually have a good balancing effect on the load generation that's already happening. So there is no additional load. The second factor, when you look at emissions, air pollution emissions, it is much easier to control emissions at a centralized plant level. So you can put in scrubbers, you can put in numerous technologies to control it at the plant level, whereas to do it at an individual vehicle level becomes much more difficult and far more expensive. So we've gone from BS4 to BS6. We still have emissions. It's not that we are emission free. The only way that we can have emission free in an urban environment, and urban is where the problem is going electric. So there is better control that is there at a plant level rather than individual level. We have 12 of the 15 most polluted cities in the world are actually in India. And urban vehicles play a very, very important role when it comes to urban pollution. So it is a step in the right direction. Each vehicle that we look at, each two-wheeler that we look at, produces 1.98 tons of carbon emissions over the lifetime, which is equivalent to planting actually 11 trees, which would produce the same amount of oxygen. So it is moving in the right direction for sure. There is absolutely no two ways about it. So what we are going to find is, at least when it comes from automotive perspective, the world is headed towards electrification. And that technology is going to continuously keep on evolving and eventually going into hydrogen fuel cell, maybe in the next 20, 25 years. But going back to emission products, going back to oil-based products, I think we've moved away from that and are moving away very, very rapidly.
Rashmi ji, I would encourage you or prompt you, because this is something which is really your area of expertise, that how does a country like India, which is still dependent on energy needs or global imports of energy need, really walk on the path of environmental, becoming self-sufficient? We import crude, we import coal, and that is going to remain like this for next couple of years.
Yeah, very true. That's really the challenge before us. And Mr. Munjal was talking about the electric vehicles. If you look at the size of the problem, I mean, the transport are 15% of the total emissions in the country at the moment. The rest of the emissions come either from the power sector or from other sectors like minor emissions come from agriculture as well through the use of fertilizers. So the electric vehicles, you very rightly put, it's more a concept at this stage. It's more a symbolic response of the community. It's essentially something which is being driven by customer preference, because it doesn't make a permanent dent on the climate problem or the problem, the emissions. If you look at the entire transport sector itself, Mr. Munjal was very right. He talked about this as an urban phenomenon. So in the urban areas, the electric vehicles can solve the problem of pollution to some extent, the air pollution, but they cannot solve the problem of the environmental damage in terms of the climate stabilization. We need the entire transport sector to be addressed there, which involves long distance trucking, long distance passengers, where we don't have a solution at the moment. Technologies are not available to replace the liquid fuels. So I was coming to that, to the energy side. Energy is generating almost 80% of our total emissions in the country, and coal is 65% of our is meeting our electricity needs. In terms of primary energy, in fact, it's much more, 75%. So there is really a challenge. How do we move away from coal to better energy systems? And Prime Minister has come up with several ambitious goals at Glasgow. He talked about 500 gigawatts of renewable energy. And he also talked about 50% of our total energy needs being met from renewables, which means, in fact, some people have started saying that if we combine these two goals, it means that we will reach the peak of our emissions in 2030. If the half of the energy needs are going to be met from renewables, then obviously you have peaked in terms of emissions. But I think it's not going to happen that easily, because we are heavily dependent on coal as the source of power production. So here lies the technological choices. So far, we have been able to reduce our emissions intensity of the total production based entirely on energy efficiency. But in fact, the government reports say that we have already reduced 24% compared with 45% of our emissions intensity goal by 2018. So in the next 12 years, I think we'll reach 45% very easily. But that is not really going to help us beyond a certain point. We will hit the wall very soon because we have not been able to reduce the carbon intensity. Energy intensity is fine, emissions intensity is fine, but carbon intensity, which actually means the content of carbon in our electricity production and content of carbon in our industrial production. So industrial decarbonization and transport decarbonization is actually extremely difficult without technology. And that is where we need humongous investment in renewable energy. And unfortunately, the cost of renewables have fallen. Variable costs has fallen now. It's almost 3 rupees a unit compared with coal, which used to be 4 rupees earlier. So variable cost has fallen. But to taking cue from Mr. Munjal, the integration into the grid, that has its own cost, because you can produce solar energy during the day, but in the night there is no sun. So you have to store this energy. And the energy storage systems, energy storage technologies, shift to green hydrogen, which can replace the liquid fuels, all this involves huge investments in technology and innovation. And that is where our challenges lie. But I think there is hope here, because in the last 7 years, we have been able to increase our renewable energy sector capacity by almost 10 times. From mere 10 gigawatts, we have now increased it to 105 gigawatts. But we have to go almost to 2,000 gigawatts by 2040 and 2050 if we have to meet our net zero goal. Where is this investment going to come from? At what terms? Are we going to access the capital markets internationally, or and what is the framework available? That is really the challenge. So both technology in terms of shift to green hydrogen, shift to solar energy, and the access to capital markets is going to be the challenge.
Professor, Bill Gates once famously said that we always overestimate the rate of change in the short term, underestimate in the long term. I guess we're going through that, aren't we? Are overestimating a lot of things and underestimating the long-term impact of that. Where do you think we are on the verge of a big breakthrough? Wind was considered to be the ultimate solution. It never has really progressed the way we thought. Solar is kicking in. While we can talk about good numbers, but we still have a long way to go. In your assessment, as a scientist, where do you think the next breakthrough is coming in climate change?
I think to me, the next breakthroughs are the old breakthroughs. So I think we need to come back to aggressive restoration of ecologies, restoration of our forests. Unfortunately, as you know, with the progress in the industrialization and India's vision of growth, what we're actually doing is decimating our forests. And if you look at, so we've also done back of the envelope calculations, a number of people have done the same thing. If you look at commons land that poor people hold, in terms of the kinds of areas where they do pasture, where they do grazing, where they do community forestry, and you just invested money in protecting those forests and allowing them to restore ecosystems. I'm not using the word afforestation deliberately because you can plant eucalyptus and call it afforestation. You can cut down natural forests and call it afforestation. I'm saying restoring ecosystems. That has an incredible capacity for carbon sequestration. And I want to emphasize this: when we focus, monolithically on carbon, we're forgetting biodiversity, we're forgetting pollution, we're forgetting all of the other things that make life worth living on. So the fact is, when you restore ecosystems, it's not a fancy technology. It requires much more hard work. It requires actually turning land back to many indigenous communities who know how to protect this land. But what it does is gives you the triple, all the things that you need for sustainability. It protects the biodiversity, which means you have more pollination, which means your crops are going to grow better, which means then you will survive climate change. You have a larger likelihood of your agriculture surviving climate change. You're going to get more rainfall and help to balance the global climate by avoiding these, local heat changes that you get because you've cut down the forest. You're going to get more groundwater infiltration, which again means that you can continue with two cropping. India's not, I'm not sure, but whether 20 years from now, India can continue growing two crops. If we run out of groundwater and the climate is only going to give us enough water for one crop a year, that is going to be disastrous for our food security. So I think we need to think of game changer technologies, but I really, really think we need to go back to the old fashioned ways of looking at planting. Our own research, we're talking about pollution. We talk so much about these smoke scrubbers. Just having trees on city roads can cut several kinds of pollution metrics by 75%. Just having trees on roads. And now think of, any city, I think all of us, any city that we think of, we've lost, I think, 10, 15, 20 lakh trees in the past 10 years. I'll guarantee you that's the number, in that range. So I think we really, you will see that I'm more of a believer in letting nature do its things, and also figuring out how we can use the power of collectives with the power of mobilization to push for these kinds of changes. Because really, carbon capture, the big game changers of technology, they've come and they've gone, and we need all of them, but really we need something much more than that. We need to think of what can we do beyond the technology.
Thank you very much. You're a change agent, and being a change agent is not difficult. When you look back and look at your role as a change agent, I'm sure there must be some frustrating moments, some moments where you said, oh, what am I doing? Am I doing the right thing? How do you deal with that?
No, honestly, Nikunj, I've not had any moments of or wondered whether I was doing the right thing. I think I've done this and I will continue to do this because this is the only way I know how to live. It's just driven by pure love and passion and purpose. And it's something that I do because I believe if I don't do it, I would not be a good parent to my children, and I would not be a good citizen to our planet. And it's really a matter of our survival and our health. So no, I haven't had, but there's been many moments of frustration, yes, because we are really grappling with helping more and more people recognize the immediacy, the urgency, and and how the problem really affects and impacts everyone. I've heard many words being used through the course of this evening. I joined early at 4 and I was listening to all the speakers, big takeaways from everyone. But when we talk about being generation restoration, and I really want to say that when Dr. Harini is asking us to go back to the basics, she's basically saying that, if we don't restore nature, we don't restore biodiversity, we don't take the action that is needed to solve the climate crisis, we can't really hope for achieving any of our goals, because climate action, which is goal 13, is the most critical goal. And without succeeding with that goal, we can't succeed or we can't hope to achieve any of the other goals. And while every single goal is interconnected, I think it's been extremely frustrating for me as an individual to help more and more companies recognize that CSR initiatives need to become more diverted and focused and concentrated on environmental protection and action. I can't even begin to tell you how difficult it is to get people to share funds or donate funds towards foresters, forest rangers, guards. I mean, in the second wave of COVID, we lost over 500 of our Van Rakshaks. And we tried so hard to raise money to just give an ex gratia pound to the families of, our martyrs. And it's been such a challenge. We try and raise money for children, we manage. We try and raise money for education, we manage. You go to anybody for money for anything other than climate action and environmental action, you'll get money. But when you ask for climate action or environmental action, it's such a big challenge. And I think out of sheer desperation this year, last year on my 40th birthday, I decided to make this announcement where I said I'm going to donate 40 lakhs for my 40th birthday instead of having a fancy party. I don't know why people host this anyway. They do nobody no good. And I hope that people would kind of meet that goal. And kind of contribute to the fund, and it's been so tough. So yes, I think many young people feel a sense of anguish and desperation because we just don't have the funding that is required to tell climate stories, to help organizations that are doing great work in the field, to save lives, really. So that's I think the toughest part, but good sense will hopefully prevail soon, and CSR will hopefully make it mandatory to at least allocate 2% of CSR to environmental action, if not more.
Mr. Munjal was smiling all the time when Dia was speaking. So I don't know what is he referring to. And especially when you said difficult to convince corporates to come ahead with fund, he had a bigger smile on his face. Mr. Munjal, did I read it wrong? You want to say something?
I've been in this space for so long, the electric vehicle, and talking about environment and automotive and change from IC polluting vehicles to electric vehicles. It was just, so we're not the only ones fighting a battle. There are numerous others who are fighting this battle on different fronts. So I was glad to hear that.
You didn't react to my question. Corporates not committing.
No, corporates certainly. There is a level of commitment which is already there, and it's already happening. We're already seeing that happening. So as I was saying earlier, corporates will commit as we go along. It is the youth which is pushing it. We're going to end up with a situation, when I look at from an automotive perspective, in the next number of years, just like what we find at Diwali, where the children are saying and the youth are saying, please don't burst any crackers, and we don't want to burst any crackers. We'll be questioned for driving cars which are polluting. As Dr. Rashmi was talking about, in terms of the urban pollution which exists, and I was talking earlier about the vehicles, etc. There are numerous ways to look at it. Vehicular pollution is one of them. Of course, you've got industrial pollution, and you've got construction dust, and you've got the parali burning which happens in parts of India, etc. So corporates are doing the best that they can at this point of time. I wouldn't say that everybody is participating. There are a number of corporates who are doing a fantastic job. There's a lot of them which actually have a lot of catching up to do. If you look at, even for example, if you look at pollution and not just air pollution, you look at the amount of garbage that is dumped into our rivers and our canals and everything. It is insane, the amount of work that is required there. There is a lot of cleansing up which is being done. It's work in progress. It's taken us so long of industrialization for the companies to actually start that. To convert is going to be a process. It is going to take a little bit of time, and corporates, serious corporates, responsible corporates certainly are moving in that direction.
Now we've got nearly 620 attendees and 175 questions. That's a record in itself. I will encourage more questions and more questions to our panelists also. So I'm just going to shift.
I must just say that they're lovely questions before I'm reading the questions as the chat is going on, and fantastic to see these kinds of questions coming in.
That's the youth of India which we are talking about. Okay, so I'm just going to take the liberty of asking one more question. I'll use the liberty of my anchor chair, and this is for Rashmi ji. Rashmi ji, in India, we use a word called Sasta Sundar Tikau. We are talking about climate change. We are talking about pollution. The Indian population is a rural population who has to focus on Sasta Sundar Tikau. And till the time that does not change, everything will end up becoming a theory. Remember, sir, India is Sasta Sundar Tikau.
Absolutely right. If in the urban setting, we can talk of customer preference driving the change. But in the rural India, if you look at the entire range of different stakeholders in India, you will have to look at the sustainable solutions, the really sustainable solutions. And Mr. Munjal was also talking about cost of compliance being the major hurdle before the industry. So how do we reduce the cost of compliance for the industry and the cost of goods and the products for the people as a whole, citizens and the individuals, to be able to incentivize their preference? So obviously, we have to find sustainable business solutions. We cannot simply ask business to internalize all the cost and bear it, because the consumers cannot bear that cost. Ultimately, they have to sell their products. So we need, there are two ways of doing it. All over the world, the environmental problems have been solved or addressed to a certain extent through regulation. Regulatory changes have always been the driving factor in solving the environmental problems. So if we really look at the climate change as a global problem, as a societal problem, we will have to look at the products which we are consuming, where emissions are or our carbon intensity is a major factor. We'll look at those products and make them green. Look at the cost. Can we create a level playing field for the businesses so that the cost is internalized by them and there is no competition here? Because basically the producer fears the competition most. The business person looks at the market share. So he or she should not lose the market share. The only way to ensure that is to create a level playing field for them through a regulatory framework. So that's one possible. Second, of course, is the consumer awareness. That we have all talked about. And here we put our hopes in the youth, that they become much more environmentally conscious, they drive this. But this will need empowerment. It's simply not a question of individual and moral choice. They need them to be empowered in terms of incomes. They need to be empowered in terms of a range of choices available to them. So the third thing which I was going to suggest is that we need to make the business solutions sustainable, is to look at some kind of innovative system solutions. For example, LED. I think somebody had talked about LED bulbs. Dia had talked about it. Now, how did the LED bulbs, this initiative succeed in India? It was basically because of procurement. So the public procurement policies driven by the EESL, they brought down the cost of the LED bulbs. They are still much more costlier than the other CFLs, but at least they have made them affordable, and they have brought down the cost for the business as a whole and for the consumers as a whole. That's how I think the large public procurement policies large regulatory policies which can support these large procurements are one way of bringing down the cost of goods. Steel, I think you had talked about initially. Steel is one of the industrial products which needs to be made green. How do we make it green? Because it's one of the expensive items where a lot of carbon consumption takes place. Coal is used there, both in terms of heating as well as producing steel. So can we think of making green steel as one of the primary requirements for the construction industry? I mean, if we bring this kind of regulation, it will automatically make it mandatory for everyone to use that. The cost will certainly go up, but then the cost will be levelized for everyone. Similarly is the question of green hydrogen. Hydrogen, for example, is expensive, much more expensive fuel, but its technology is available. But it's beyond the reach of the common man, beyond the reach of the industry, because we have not taken measures to bring down the cost. So we need to find innovative business solutions, regulatory solutions to bring down the cost of the products and the goods, so that we make it sustainable for the people to make choice. They can't make choice in the absence of the incomes and empowerment. That is what we need to do there.
Yes, Dia.
Nikunj, I've been dying to jump in because I think one of the most important factors that addresses what Rajani has just said is two things. One is very strong political will that then will translate into effective policy. And the second is something that we've been working very long and hard on, but we've not really seen a result on, which is extended producers' responsibility. So all of these companies and organizations and industries that are, contributing to pollution and are creating the mess that we're, inhaling and breathing and living and suffering because of, have to be held accountable. And there isn't a strong. There are guidelines that have been drafted. I know there are two versions of it that are still floating around the ministries, but haven't gone through. But it's something that we've been repeatedly saying is so essential. So I think young people can really hold industry and the political fabric of our country accountable for these two things. One, to exercise strong political will where climate action becomes a part of the electoral mandate. If somebody is not talking about climate and climate action, don't vote for that person. And the second thing, of course, is extended producers' responsibility. It's something that we really have to drive and push hard for.
It's so true. It's so true. Well, I'm just going to change gears now and move to the Q&A answers. So I'm just going to shamelessly pick up my mobile phone. WhatsApp these days is a convenient way to communicate. So just bear with me. Just an announcement, a sponsor announcement. The award-winning questions in this session has been sponsored by Mark Exhaust. And we got a very interesting question coming for Professor Harini. Just bear with me for a second. My sincere apologies. Being a television anchor, I ask questions for a living, but when I have to ask questions on behalf of someone, it becomes a challenge. So I have to struggle to see my WhatsApp sometimes. Okay, Professor, this question is coming your way. This is from Paramjeet Singh, and Paramjeet wants to know, I would like to ask, how can we make sure that rural India also becomes part of this initiative and contributes in India's quest to achieve sustainability goals?
I think rural India is actually the one that is keeping urban India from transgressing. So to me, rural India is far more, definitely hugely more sustainable than urban India. What can we do? I think we need to rethink. There are projections that say that by 2050, India will become more than 50% urban. Right? How long can we slow that down? I don't think we can stop it, but how long can we slow that down? I think we can slow it because people are moving from rural areas not because they want to, moving to cities not because they have, all of them have better lives, but they move to much more unsustainable lives in the city because we don't give them a choice. So can we strengthen rural livelihoods? I think that is something we really need to think of. And when we strengthen rural livelihoods, can we do it so that the environment is a very integral part of those livelihoods? I think we tend to, this is our mindset. We tend to think of industrial jobs and the industrial sector as providing them with a way into the economy. But they've lived and they've had integrations with the economy through, let's say, forest products, through agriculture, through various other kinds of value adds. So I think, to me, that's something we can do. The Jharkhand government, for instance, has this very excellent initiative called Jharcraft, and there are a number of these, similar kinds of things across the country, where you work with rural communities, let's say women who live in villages, help them do their rural handicrafts, but in a way that they can be marketed to urban consumers, so they can stay, but they get that little bit of value add to stay in their environment. So that's something we need to be thinking about for sustainability. How do we slow the rural to urban transition? How can we reverse it in some ways? MNREGA is another part of it. The Karnataka government is doing a lot by using the MNREGA funds to restore water bodies. Now, if you restore water bodies, you have your agriculture fixed. If you have your agriculture fixed, people move back to their villages. And so how can we do those kinds of things?
So, Professor, do you think somewhere going back to, like you referred to, going back to roots is the solution? If you boost up the agricultural crop, a lot of things will be taken care of. That could be done with a combination of better seeds, better farming, and very simple solutions in terms of water and irrigation.
Water and irrigation, yes, but I think a lot of chemical-free farming. I mean, for instance, Sikkim is doing it, Telangana is doing it. Now, states are trying to do this at a large level. So it's not the organic farming, which is the niche, very high-end consumers, but I think, really state governments are giving this a push. So we need to find out those kinds of ways of millet farming, of trying to go back to roots, absolutely. I just want to say one thing which I've not had a chance to say through this, but I want to bring in, since you're saying youth, one word that I've seen, we've discussed a lot of things on this panel. We've not discussed what can often become a dirty word today, which is activism, but I think it's the most important thing we need to get from the youth. Because if you look at activism, the only thing that has made a difference in terms of pushing governments to act and to be much more responsive to the real needs has been that kind of activism. And activism can be action of all kinds. It could be something as simple as in your corporate job, asking your company to rewild or to not have manicured grass but wild and more natural spaces. It could be all kinds of things, from that all the way to real court-based. Aditya Dubey is this young boy in Delhi who's been pushing the government, and many people may know, to ask large companies to reduce their plastic footprint. I think these are the kinds of things that have really made the big difference. So I mean, since I haven't heard that on the panel, I thought I just put that word out there so that we don't close without discussing this.
That's a great point. And, the whole purpose-driven drive what Dia had in terms of cleaning the beaches in Mumbai, I won't say activism, but that in a sense was one of the most, biggest realizations for us, right, Dia?
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Activism is essential.
The next question is from Richa Sharma for Rashmi ji. At one hand, Rashmi ji, we are committing to zero carbon emissions by 2070. And on the other hand, we wish and we want the economy to grow to $5 trillion. Isn't that contradictory? Because with growth comes energy. With energy, you need other things to be taken care of.
Yes, but I don't say this as contradictory. I mean, 2070 net zero goal is an aspirational goal at this moment. But we are certainly moving away from dirty energy. I know coal is, as we were discussing, coal continues to be the primary source of our energy, but we have started moving away from coal. Today, in the last 7 to 8 years, we have created electricity generation capacity from renewables of almost 105 gigawatts, which includes, of course, solar, wind, hydro altogether. And then from 2015 or 2016 onwards, if I remember correctly, the share of coal in total energy production has remained almost constant. It's not rising any further. Of course, in absolute terms, the consumption of coal as source of energy is still rising. But in relative terms, if you look at this, the entire electricity demand, the coal share has remained constant, which means renewables are rising in the system. So in our energy production system, at least, renewables are getting a larger space. And the reason being because the cost of solar energy has fallen. And how did it fall? It fell because of the targets set by the government. The government came up with a target of 125 gigawatts initially, then it came up with 450, then it's now has a target of 500 gigawatts by 2030. So if all these targets are actually implemented by the state governments and by the central government together, of course, the resources will come from the private sector. Then we will be able to generate this much of renewable energy and bring down the share of coal and move away from coal to a cleaner energy system. The question is of cost of integration of this energy into the grid. For that, we need really green hydrogen to be able to store the energy, or other energy storage technologies like batteries. So that is a challenge indeed, finding the finance and finding the technologies which can help us move away from dirty energy to cleaner energy. But we are successfully moving away from coal, and the direction is very, very positive. So I don't see a contradiction in this. But what I was also trying to say, that it cannot be done only with the help of energy efficiency, which has been the primary focus so far. Improving energy intensity is fine, but we need to bring down the intensity of carbon in our production system. And that will happen only if we move towards cleaner energy sources in industries. Industrial decarbonization and transport decarbonization, these are the twin challenges. Together they constitute almost 40% of our emissions. So through renewables, we can target about 50 to 60% of our total energy emissions, but the rest 40% are extremely inflexible at this point of time in the absence of technology. They will need a movement towards green hydrogen, energy storage, and then that needs a huge amount of financial investments. Technology is not really the problem there, but a regulatory framework which levelizes the cost for all the players, that is really the key here. So both the governments and the industry will have to join hands together, and then it's achievable. It's not difficult.
Ankur's got a question for Dia Mirza. And Dia, this question is, the role of youth and the millennial generation is very important nowadays. What are different programs that the government and international organizations are doing to spread more awareness among the youth?
I think one of the reasons why young people have become so proactive and so active in spreading not just awareness, but holding governments and policymakers accountable, questioning bad policy, and adopting more sustainable lifestyles is because of two of the organizations that I actually represent, well, with the United Nations Environment Program and the United Nations. I think a lot has to do with the fact that we've launched and successfully conducted very powerful campaigns that have mobilized action from the youths and made them stakeholders and given them a seat at the table. All negotiations are now incomplete without young people, like a youth representative. Some of the campaigns that I would like to draw everybody's attention to is, of course, the Beat Plastic Pollution campaign that was launched in India a few years ago, that led to that historic pledge that our Prime Minister made about making India single-use plastics free by 2022, which is why we received that list that we have recently that's going to, disallow or discontinue the production and the manufacturing of those items. The other campaign that I think more and more people are becoming aware of and that has really strengthened them and their activism is the Wild for Life campaigns, where young people globally are understanding how anthropogenic activities have reduced and have destroyed so many wild species. What is the role that we can play as individuals to protect wildlife? How, say, for example, the snow leopard is the thermometer for climate change, how India is one of the greatest habitats for the snow leopard, and how melting glaciers in our Himalayas is going to impact not just the habitat of the snow leopard, but the lives and the livelihoods of millions of people living in these areas. So connecting wildlife with human beings and understanding and helping people understand that interconnectedness is, I think, a result of this very powerful campaign. The third thing that we do successfully is bring the governmental report, the IPCC report to young people. I think when I was in school, I never had access to it. I know young people today across the world have access to these reports, and these are very powerful reports that really help young people understand what the stage of the problem is, what the solutions are, and how we can all become agents and change makers. The fourth, and I think the most important thing, is that it is all of these campaigns that facilitate an engagement with young people and also bring them to. So, for example, COP26 was, said to be a cop out, but to me it was a great event, not within the domain of the program, but outside. It was the participation of young people, the conversations they were having outside, the questions they were demanding of leaders across the world. That to me was very powerful, and I think a direct result of the role and the work that the UN and the United Nations Environment Programme have done in facilitating and empowering young minds globally. And I have a great leader in the Secretary General who, of course, with the Sustainable Development Goals and the great work that we're doing in bringing the goals to schools across the country. I can't remember 10 years ago, young children talking about the SDGs, the way they know them now, the way they understand them now, and the way they seek methods and manners in which they can adopt the sustainable goals at an individual level. And I think this is a result of the work that many great people have done, including you, Dr. Harini. But I think that this really, when the knowledge and the science becomes accessible to young people, while they deal with the intensity and the problem of the scale of the issues, I think it's that really that drives solutions, the ones that we are experiencing and are seeing young people drive. In fact, some of the winners of the FMS Forum Environment Heroes today were fantastic examples of environmental stewardship. Just young people who got up and said, I'm going to change this. I'm going to fix it. I'm going to fix the air pollution crisis. I'm going to bring innovation that is going to lead to change at a grassroots level. And this is the kind of change that we need.
Yeah, I always say that India has the skill, we have the scale, and we have the ability. So the last question for Mr. Munjal, and this one is coming from Kuldeep Singh. Mr. Munjal, the question is, how do you foresee evolution of EV sector with entries of other big players, and will support to alternate fuels like hydrogen might impact EV?
See, technology is going to be okay. To answer that question, first and foremost, competition coming in is always good because you're expanding the market. Right now, it's a very small market. It's a very small pie. As competition comes in, it expands hugely. And that's always a good thing. So we ourselves as a company have been working, while we work on our individual strategies on how do we expand as a company, we also work on how do we expand the whole sector. For example, we reskill the workforce when it comes to the roadside mechanics in how to handle electric vehicles. They didn't understand it. They are very good with IC engine fixing the basic problems, but they don't really quite understand electric. So we've already trained 7,000 of them. Idea is to train 25,000 of them. Now, while they're trained by us, they can actually, they're reskilled to fix any vehicle. So that's how we are creating that ecosystem. The second is we are putting in a charging infrastructure for all kinds of electric two-wheelers. Now, these are installed by us, but effectively any vehicle can be charged there. So that's how you create the ecosystem. Now, in terms of technology, that technology is going to continuously keep on evolving. So right now we're working on lithium-ion batteries, we've got sodium-ion, and we've got sodium-sulfur, zinc, manganese, and then we've got solid state and hydrogen fuel cell, and the list just goes on. One thing is for certain, we are never going to go back to emission products. So we're never going to go back to oil or fuel-based, polluting-based technologies when it comes to automotive. And we will continue, and the market will continue to evolve. So we, in electric mobility in vehicles, it's the same as your computers and phones and everything. Every generation that comes out is far better than the previous one. So we are following a Moore's curve. where there is a drop in price which is happening, but that's not going to continue. That's finite. I mean, that's not going to continue happening indefinitely. It is going to stop at some point of time. And what you're going to see is more power coming in. So you will find batteries, for example, the chemistry is changing, becoming more durable, longer lasting, compactor, more energy storage in them, faster charge, etc., etc. So that's going to continue happening. And as this technology evolves, more and more adoption is going to happen. So what we are finding right now, for example, is because of the support that comes in from the government, these vehicles have become cheaper than an IC engine vehicle to own. In any case, they were very, very low when it comes to the TCO gap, what is called the total cost of ownership. That gap has hugely widened in favor of electric vehicles simply because of the price of fuel. We've gone to 106 odd rupees for a liter of petrol around the country. So that gap has widened. The initial purchase price has come down because of the support that's there from the center and the states. So I'm confident that we are going to graduate, and we are extremely bullish on this sector, on the electric vehicle sector moving forward. And like I said, technology is just going to continuously evolve, whether it is in power generation and whether it comes into the vehicles.
It's Saturday evening, and we've shamelessly extended our appointment with our panelists. So I'm just going to thank all of them individually. They are starting with you. Thank you very much. As a child, I used to always get excited when I used to see a rainbow, but the new rainbow which you've suggested, that's making me excited about how I want to make some small changes. Professor, so nice to connect with you. Your whole idea about going back to roots is something which will always stay with me. Rashmi ji, fantastic to hear your thoughts on, especially on the carbon emission, that how energy and the fuel consumption pattern will change and how that will lead to control of carbon emission. And Mr. Munjal, always a pleasure to talk to you. Your bullishness on EV is something which is visible now, and the good work which you're doing in making this technology more affordable is absolutely brilliant. Thank you all very much, and thank you for joining us on this forum. With that, I'll just give it back to them.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.